with the Burnbeo Trust. It's a landscape charity in Kinvarran, County Galway. And if anybody isn't familiar with the work of the Burnbeo Trust, I'd highly recommend that you link in with them. They have amazing resources online as well, with previous talks with David Savell and Richard Louv and all of that. So Anya has done has worked in a wide range of community settings, formal and informal education settings, and she's currently doing her PhD, a funded employment-based PhD with NUIG Galway. Anya, we are delighted to have you, and so looking forward to the topic of kind of place-based education. So thank you. I'll hand it over to you now.
That's brilliant, Mary. Thanks so much. And thank you to Georgia and Mary and the team for organising such an amazing event and for asking me to participate. I'm always delighted to talk about place-based learning because it's something that I really care passionately about. And with that said, I will do we're all getting used to it at this stage, the old share screen trick, but seeing as I have pretty pictures, I can promise you, if nothing else, I'm going to share a couple. Yeah, so like Mary kind of mentioned, I work with Burnbeo Trust, and I'm going to hopefully for the next 45 minutes or so, and then maybe have time for some questions, just go over a few different bits and pieces from my experience and how we do things, I suppose, in Burnbeo. So I'll give a brief introduction to myself and probably give a bit of background into how I got to be where I am, which I'm sure quite a few of you will relate to. I think it's probably a similar story in a lot of cases. I will give you, like I said, a bit of a quick overview of Burnbeo and place-based learning, hopefully share some of the values of a place-based approach and why we see it really as just a really worthwhile endeavour. And then I'm probably straying into the workshop territory, but I can't help it because at heart I'm a practitioner. That's what I do. I have found myself recently in the academic world, and I'm straddling both at the moment. I'm a practitioner and a researcher, but I think I'm definitely more comfortable in the research, or in the practice field, and because of that, and equally I think it's useful at these kind of things to be coming away with maybe a few more tools in the kit. So with that said, when I was asked to do this, I started thinking obviously about what it was I was going to say, and I thought back to my own childhood. I was prompted in some ways by a presentation similarly, like I'd seen just a few months back by somebody also connected to GMIT there, and talking, I suppose, about the wild places and the places that had significant in childhood, because play, rightly or wrongly, definitely made me think of childhood. And as I'll kind of touch on, I suppose, as I go, I don't think it should be in any way confined to younger years. I think adults enjoy play every bit as much and probably don't get half enough opportunity to do it. But I did think of this place. And this place, believe it or not, I'm sure it didn't immediately jump out to any of you as being massively significant, or you probably, it doesn't have the kind of the signpost that says it's an adventure playground, but I promise you that's what it is and what it was for me and my siblings. And I grew up in County Meath, rural County Meath, in as rural as County Meath can be at this stage. But I grew up on a kind of a small farm, and then there were obviously plenty of farms around us. And we spent our childhood, we were lucky, so lucky that had parents that were interested in bringing us outside. And we spent our childhood roaming the fields. And like I said, when I was asked to give the presentation, I thought of this place, which was our adventure playground, and that's what we called it. I was really upset then, subsequent years, to discover that adventure playgrounds were an actual thing, which had kind of structures and were places that you paid to go, and you climbed up on things and jumped off things and whatever. But anyway, this was the original and the best. But I sent a message to the family WhatsApp group, the obligatory family WhatsApp group, and asked my mother, who's still living here, to go and take a few photos so that I could share them. and she sent these back. And what was really interesting was myself and my siblings, you know, we kind of reminisced about the place, but also we had different memories and it had different significances for all of us, despite a shared experience with the place. And like, as you can see, it looking back on it, I can see now it's nothing special. You know, it's a corner of a field where two farms met, and there was a little stream that ran. But what was nice was, now obviously not so nice at the time probably, and wouldn't be the practice now, there was a place where the livestock could get down into the stream to drink from it, which meant that there was a bank that we could get in and get up close and personal and wet and mucky and all of those good things. And we did regularly. And we would obviously just make up our own games and mess about here for hours. Now that's all the rose tinted glasses side of it. There was also, I'm sure, miserable wet days where we were complaining and wanted nothing to do with the place. But like I said, the kind of memories that came back through the WhatsApp group were universally just positive, and yeah, it was really nice to see. And then my mother shared with us that actually she'd been a bit strategic in the whole thing, in that she had four young kids. I'm the eldest, and then there were three under me, kind of down 5 years in between. And we all got really badly car sick. So she was always trying to find things that she could do with us that we didn't have to go anywhere. It was a smart move. Equally didn't cost anything. So, you know, it was strategic on her part. And also what she said, and I thought this was interesting, was that the adventure playground came about in some ways because this was kind of the furthest point from home that she thought it was feasible that we would walk. So it's about half an hour, 40 minutes maybe, depending how fast you're moving, from our house to this point. And she, you know, she kind of said, look, it was a destination. It got you there. That, you know, the whole time we were moving along and we were stopping, and, you know, we were thinking, oh, we'll get to the adventure playground, and then we'd hang out for a while, and we'd sit by this, there was a woodland just beside it, and we'd sit by the bank there and probably have a picnic. And then on the way home, it was probably the promise of cake that got us home. And, you know, it made me think about maybe how we shape these experiences for young people when they are out, and what it is that, you know, has an impact, and where the kind of significance lies. And I did, I suppose, want to just ask, just out of personal interest in some ways, but also because I think, you know, for a lot of people, these experiences can really have a shaping effect on where you go for the rest of your life. I obviously left Meath at some stage. I came to college in Galway, and then did a few other bits and pieces, and landed back in the Burren a while ago. But, you know, this kind of childhood experience was definitely a formative. So I was going to ask, I don't know, somebody, maybe Georgia there, if she would just launch a really quick poll that I put together, just to see, do other people have places like this from their childhood? I'd be surprised to hear that they didn't, but at the same time, that would be good too. That would be an interesting finding. And when I was putting this together, and I was trying to think about, you know, what questions could you ask that would get a kind of a feel for where people were coming from, I was trying to figure out what other kind of information you could get from it. And I suppose anecdotally, a lot of talk seems to be around the fact that maybe these experiences aren't as common now. I was wondering, you know, could I in some way try to figure out if, you know, it was age related, but it just got too complicated for the purposes that we have here. But just a simple question, if people have a chance there, just to give it a yes or no in terms of if they had a similar place that they went to and had significance, and that they kind of remember from their own childhood. I don't know if that's working there.
It's just a few more seconds, Anya.
Perfect.
We're about 70% in.
Oh, great. Thanks, Georgia.
Okay, I'll close it now.
That's interesting. Yeah. So, you know, 92%. I don't know, can we say that we are representative, or whether that's a kind of a reflection of the group that are here and have an interest? But I think it is interesting, and I think it's important maybe to hold that. And look, I've seen plenty of people who give talks like this kind of mention or start in this way. but it is interesting. And like I said, I'd love to know where those, you know, the people who haven't, where the breakdown is. Is it an age thing? Or maybe, I think possibly saw just in the chat there, it might be maybe an urban rural, but I know in an awful lot of urban places, obviously there's a huge amount of wild places, and these places don't even necessarily have to be wild places. They could just have been places that people went. So that's really interesting to see. Thank you for doing that. So that's kind of a bit of the background to how I started this interest, and how I, like I said, went to Galway. I studied science and then did a whole pile of other different things and landed, I think that the luckiest thing that ever happened to me in 2012, I joined Burren Biotrust, and I'm absolutely honoured and privileged to work for the organisation and with the people that we work alongside. Like Mary mentioned at the start, we are an independent membership charity, and we're dedicated to connecting all of us to our places and helping to identify our role in caring for these places. And the organisation started obviously with a very strong focus on the Burren, the region in the Limestone region in Clare, County Clare and Galway on the west coast in Ireland. The hint there is in the name, but since then, the organisation was founded in 2008, and I think over the years, the programs have been so successful and have had such a positive response that it caused us, and also because we were being asked, I suppose, it caused us to start to look a little bit more broadly and look beyond the Burren, to see whether there was learning that we had from our experience that could be shared with other and new communities. So that's why you'll see even in the kind of the mission statement there that it's moved beyond just the Burren now to kind of a more broad focus on place and place connection. And how we do this is through and under the umbrella of place-based learning, which for us, we define it as learning about place, in the place, for the place. And I think from the outset, it's important to say, we didn't come up with this. It's not our invention, and we're not claiming any of what I have to say as ours. It's very much things that have been picked up and adapted over the years. You know, Mary mentioned David Sabel and Richard Louv and other Irish-based educators. You know, we've often had input from people from GMIT and various other institutions, and we've kind of picked and chosen the bits and pieces that make sense for us and that we can apply in our setting. And I think that that's a nice way to look at it too, that, you know, there are approaches and initiatives kind of all over the place, and to find that the pieces of that are relevant for you and your work. And the other thing I think to mention is that very often place-based work falls under place-based education, where it's kind of focused a little bit more on formal education settings and, you know, learning about local places and then kind of working through that and kind of avenue, which we do. It's an important part of our work, but for us it's much broader than that. It's whole community, and that's very deliberate and a very important part of what we do. It's kind of cradle to grave and everything in between. So that's why we refer to it more as place-based learning. It's a little bit more all-encompassing rather than just formal education. So what is it that we actually do? So we've, I think at this stage, about 27 different programs that we deliver. We have 5 part-time staff, and obviously then an army of volunteers who help us out. But we do have a very strong focus on education and learning. So we do work in primary, secondary schools, but we then have learning kind of programs that are out in the community or for younger people as well, not through their formal education. We have a series of walks and talks that take part across the Burren region. And again, our walks, for instance, are very much about information sharing rather than covering vast swathes of the countryside. It's a community, bringing people together, getting to meet your neighbours, have a chat, and very often see a part of your area that maybe isn't always publicly accessible. So very often it's on farmland, and the walks are led by farmers. And again, in terms of what we do and our approach, we kind of value all members of the community and the story that they have to share. The talks then are in a local village hall where people can come and have a cup of tea beforehand. They're called the tea talks, very strategically, because if you organise a talk about, I don't know, butterflies, you know, you'll get probably a very specific audience. Whereas if you organise a tea talk and say, look, come and meet your neighbours and then hear this interesting talk about butterflies, chances are you're going to widen the net a little bit. No pun intended there. We also have a group of over 300 active conservation volunteers. And again, it's another way of looking at learning about place and engaging with place, is to actually do something physical. So these guys here have been spending a morning clearing a maternity roost site for bats in the Burren. But we also do quite a lot of rebuilding of stone walls, biodiversity monitoring, litter picks, helping on archaeological digs, and clearing scrub and maintaining archaeological sites. So again, with each of those events, there's a leader, I suppose, or, you know, somebody who has information on the site to share. So if you're doing a litter pick on the beach, for instance, there's a marine ecologist or, you know, a botanist, so that it's not just a litter pick, that there's also the opportunity to ask questions and learn a little bit as you go. And then the final piece of our work that I just wanted to mention, and I think a really, really important piece, and a word that I come back to quite a lot, and I think something to maybe consider again in your own work, is the idea of celebration. So we coordinate 2 large community celebrations. We have Burn and Bloom, which takes place at the start of the kind of flowering season. So it has moved on occasion, trying to find when we might get decent weather, or as kind of biodiversity was, you know, not following the patterns it always did. You know, things were blooming earlier or later, but, you know, we generally stick to around May. You have Burn and Bloom, and then the image here is from the Burn Winterage Weekend, which takes place on the October bank holiday weekend. And it's a celebration of the region's farming practices and traditions and the farming heritage of the area. And again, you know, some of you, and apologies for those who are familiar with the Burren and Burren Bio, you know, you'll have heard this before, but the reason we celebrate winterage specifically in the Burren is that it's quite unique. It's the reverse really of what happens in a lot of the world. It's reverse transhumance. So in a lot of upland areas, or areas with uplands and mountains associated, they move their livestock down closer to the farms in the winter. But in the Burren, we put them up into the upland areas, hence why they're called winterages, that the cattle overwinter there. And it's actually as a result of this practice that we have the Burren landscape that we are familiar with today, and that the Burren flowers grow in May for when we're celebrating them in Burn and Bloom, and because the cattle graze back kind of the stronger grasses and leave enough light and space then for the flowers to come. So, you know, with everything that we're doing, it's thinking of different ways of engaging the local community, which again is our primary focus. Obviously, we do have visitors come along and they're more than welcome, but our focus is on local community, engaging with local place, providing opportunities to experience and engage with your local place, and then hopefully, and I'll touch on this as we move on, empowering people and facilitating local action and local active citizenship. So yeah, just to again to mention it, Mary just said at the outset there that I started in 2018 a research project. So lucky enough to get funding from the Irish Research Council, which enables me basically to continue doing my job and stay working and stay as a practitioner in Burren Bio Trust, but also to have time to, you know, do a bit of research and engage a little bit more with the theory around what it is that we're doing and why it works and how it could be improved. And the first part of that project looked at trying to assess, which in itself is really difficult, the impact that the organisation had in the 10 years from 2008 when it was established, 2018 when I started the research, and to look to see, you know, the impact on the local community, and to get feedback in terms of what had worked, why did people take part in what we did, and what things would they like to see changed, and so on. And then the second piece, the phase that I'm working through at the moment, is about then taking that learning and sharing it with new communities around Ireland. So, sharing our experience and then providing support to communities who are interested in putting some of these initiatives in place, or something similar that is relevant to their place in practice. But I think what's important to say in this context is why people take part in what we do in Burn BO. And again, these findings are from, the preschool kids right the way up to retirees and well beyond. And the findings were across the board. It was shared in terms of why people took part. And the first one, and I think, it's interesting and it's definitely worth bearing in mind, is that people want to learn. There is a desire and a hunger to know more about local places. And I think I probably should have said earlier that when we talk about local places, we're talking about all the elements of the place. So we very often talk about a whole community, whole place approach, in that we look at the built heritage. So the old tower houses, the ring forts, the burial tombs, and everything in between, and the archaeology of the place, the natural heritage, so that the environmental, the biodiversity, and then also the cultural heritage. So those traditions like winterage and other traditions and practices that are of the community. We look at all of these elements and we look at how they interconnect. I think it's possibly one of the great weaknesses very often of our education system, and there's a lot of research around the siloing of topics that, say in universities there's an archaeology department and maybe a geography department, and they don't always come together. Thankfully that's becoming less so, but equally in schools you study history, geography, science, art, music as separates, as opposed to maybe looking at how they interconnect and how they make sense holistically, which is really how the world works. So when we talk about learning, we're talking about learning in terms of all of those elements. Another reason then why people took part, and hugely relevant here, is it's basic, and they thought it would be fun, that people want to do something that's going to be enjoyable. And if you're trying to engage somebody on topics like this, it probably doesn't need somebody doing a PhD to tell you, but at the same time, it makes it easier when you're trying to have an influence further up the line, to have the research behind you to say, look, people want to do things that are fun. A nice finding as well, though, was like engaging and having fun and learning is one thing, but people also really did want to take action. So there was a feeling that there was a responsibility on us as a community to have an impact in terms of how our place is into the future, and to get involved and to develop more this style of kind of active citizenship, or community stewardship is another phrase that's often put on it, that the community are the people who decide what's happening. The other things that came back as positives are that our programs are active. So the schools programs that I'll touch on a little bit more as I go on are active inquiry learning methodologies. Again, really important that they include outdoor and sociable elements. So outdoor, again, where it's practical, you're not going to have a talk probably outdoors, but if the event can be outside, why not? And again, that all brings back very nicely to the place-based learning idea. So basically we were doing what we want to achieve, that people are learning in the place because they're getting out and engaging with it, and then for the place, that there's this desire to take action. What was also positive is that, by getting involved, there's an increased awareness and appreciation of local places, which I think can only be a positive motivation to take action. But I think, again, what's another nice one to look at is this enhanced feeling of place connection. And I think back to me and my siblings in the adventure playground, and it made me think about the times when we'd have friends over from school, after school or at the weekends, and we'd say, come on, let's go to the adventure playground. And we'd have, of course, built this up to something huge, and they'd get there and this kind of, underwhelmed, blank look on their face, that it just didn't have the same resonance. And obviously it's because of our repeated engagement and what it meant to us. But, place connection obviously can be a whole variety of different things. People connect to place through a whole variety of different avenues. But I do think there's something there in terms of, you know, being given the opportunity to really engage with a place. It just makes sense that there's a much better chance that you will feel that strong connection and that hope that there'll be care for the place into the future. Yeah, so I mentioned that we do work in schools quite a bit, and so I just wanted to just give a little bit, a quick introduction, I suppose, to this suite now of programs. The Áitbeo kind of title is kind of the overarching title. So Áitbeo means living place, so it's acknowledging that, you know, the community are the people who are living in these places, and that's very, very central to all of our approach, that, you know, people have to be part of the story, and that, you know, decisions that are made in an office somewhere remote and then imposed on people very often don't get the desired response. So that's, you know, really central to the approach. But the other thing obviously is that, you know, that these places are living and evolving and changing around us, and to have an awareness of that, and to again ask the questions around, you know, we learn about the past and the present, and then what is it that we would like to see for the future of our places. And at this stage we have programs that we deliver in primary, secondary and community settings. It's essentially the exact same program. It's the same activities, just with, you know, slight adaptations, obviously depending on the audience. But it's, you know, it's a local heritage course at its base, where people learn about their local built natural and cultural heritage. But like I said, it's active and inquiry learning. So it's like, it's not me or anybody else going into a room and telling people, even to the extreme in that I could turn up in any one of your places if they were in Ireland and never have heard of it before, and deliver this program with no knowledge, no background knowledge. It's, you know, it's learning together and using the resources that are available, and asking questions and asking, you know, looking to kind of foster critical thinking around the things that are happening in local places. And then the nice piece that again brings us back to the place-based learning model, that learning for place. So at the end, each of these programs culminates in a stewardship project where people are supported to take some action locally on something that has kind of come up for them over the course of the project. And, you know, some really, really inspiring projects have come out of all of the different age groups, which is great to see. But the reason I really wanted to mention it is because there is a toolkit available, and it comes with the disclaimer that it's an in-house job, and you know, it's we're a small charity with minimal resources, so I'm massively putting the disclaimer on it that, you know, it could be better, but at the same time it's actually quite a comprehensive toolkit in terms of implementing a place-based learning program in whatever setting it is that you're in. And the link is there, these slides will be shared, that it is available to download, or you can buy hard copies. For those who are still fans of hard copies, you can buy hard copies from our website. But so that's there. The reason I really put that there is because I am going to just now briefly go through some of the activities that we would use very regularly that incorporate both learning and play and fun, and ways maybe of engaging with place and learning at the same time. So the first one that's up, and the page numbers there obviously just refer back to the toolkit. You know, and sorry, the other thing to mention is a lot of the images will probably feature younger people, but these are activities that we use across the age groups. And I think I kind of said it a little bit earlier, but that, you know, adults from our experience are only dying for the opportunity to get involved and have a bit of fun, you know, just something that's a little bit different and something a bit playful. So we use these activities no matter what the age group. But, you know, simple, and again, I said it at the start, I'm not claiming to have invented any of this, but we have adapted to suit our needs. And these are kind of variations very often on things that people might be familiar with. But say if we are working somewhere where there is a historical site, this, for instance, is an old church. you know, and you want people to kind of get to know it a little bit more. We may probably all have that experience of going somewhere on a school tour or whatever it was, and a guide brought us around and pointed out the points of significance, and we all kind of stood there and listened, or maybe didn't. Whereas this approach, we go to the site in advance, take some photographs of the kind of significant pieces of the site or things that we'd like to draw attention to. And we then create this very simple, you know, printed off from the office computer. That's the other thing to mention, sorry, with the toolkit and with everything we do, very low cost resources to no cost. You know, we run on a really tight budget. So, you know, it's not that we're going out buying fancy equipment to do this ever. It's at most a print out, really. Laminated photo sheets then, and each group is given a copy of the photos and a map of the site, and just sent around to hunt for them, to find the photographs and to mark them on their map. So you have a few kind of little skills there of observation and map reading and so on. We also, depending on groups, might incorporate a bit of a competition into it, in terms of, you know, the first group back gets to pick the next activity, or, you know, something simple. And then we check, you know, we look to see, did you actually find the where the photograph was taken from, and get to share at that point the kind of nugget of information, rather than it being just a, you know, dump it all out at the start. And people feel much more involved in it, in that, like, they've sought out this element themselves and are more interested to hear about it. There are again adaptations on this, where if we're working in a school, we might get the older classes to take the photographs, and then the younger classes go and find them, and, you know, different bits and pieces that you can do to adapt. This, I'm sure, is a picture quite familiar to anybody who has experience working in outdoor environmental education, the kind of circle games that are really, really popular, but really useful, and can be a great learning experience again. So, you know, Bat and Moth is the one that we have kind of outlined in our workbook, and, you know, apologies again for people who are very familiar with it, but essentially your participants stand in a circle. You have one person in the center who's blindfolded, who is the bat, and the moths, or the midges, we very often go with midges because they're a bit more relatable, have to come in and try not to be caught. And the way that they would be caught is using sound. So every time the bat says bat, the midges have to reply midgie, and then they try to catch them to eat them. And, you know, the discussions that you can have around, you know, bats habitats, and their food and so on. And another variation that is actually what they're playing here is fox and hare, fox and rabbit, where in the center is a blindfolded hare, and down at their feet, hopefully you might be able to see, they look like bean bags, but I promise you they're actually leverets and baby hares, and the fox here is trying to creep in and grab a leveret and then get back to their den to enjoy it. And again, using sound and talking about animals in their habitats and so on. And then we do a final variation of it, which is, we call it animals of the burren, but obviously animals of the forest, animals of the farm, animals of the wherever will work, where you have one person in the center again, and each of the other participants has something that donates their base. So very often we use Jenga blocks because they're light and they're easy to have in your backpack, but you could just use hats or jumpers or something, just that each person kind of has a base point. And then again, you know, I'll ask the group, you know, name me 4 animals that we might find here. If you do this at the start of a program, you'll get interesting responses. You'd be amazed at the number, or maybe not, at the number of bears and tigers and lions and things like that we have in the burren. But thankfully we usually get round to, you know, the badgers and the foxes and the squirrel, or, you know, native animals. Each person in the circle is assigned an animal, and then the person who's in the center, who has no base, calls out badgers, and all of the badgers have to move and try to find a new home. And, you know, you can do this again with homes, obviously, or shelter, but you could do it with water supply or food stuff, and again, variations on all of these things, just to get them thinking about the you know, the things that are living around us, and the kind of the difficulties that they may be encountering. like I said, you know, little to no resources, a blindfold. Those blindfolds are my colleagues cut up old bed sheets and work perfectly. And these kind of things are just brilliant, say, if you're waiting on a bus or you're just trying to kill a bit of time. But at the same time, you know, to have the focus there about it's fun and it's a game, but we can make it a learning experience as well. Again, probably all very familiar with predator prey chasing. And we use this very often in kind of moving a group from one site to another. Like I said earlier, for us coming home from the adventure playground, it was generally cake was the incentive if needed. But it's hard to provide cake at every occasion for groups. So, you know, you very simply set it up. Again, you talk about what might be local species that would be predator and prey. And you set a number of predators, a number of prey, give the prey a head start, and off they go, and the predators try catch them. And again, we will do it also in confined spaces, you know, to kind of set a boundary, which is the habitat, and talk then about, you know, carrying capacity of habitats in terms of too many predators, too many prey, or for instance, if somebody decides they're going to build a car park or a house and cuts out half of your habitat and the implications it has then on the predators and prey and so on. And it's very simple. And, you know, again, some of you are probably more than familiar with these. Another one, again, this is a brilliant activity. Very simple, blindfold, again, is all you need. Find your, and it's ... because we generally play find your rock, but that obviously doesn't kind of translate across the board. So find your tree, find your flower, find your various, you know, insert landscape feature here basically. And how it works is, again, in pairs. You have one of your pair blindfolded and the other person is looking after them. And, you know, with all of this, and I know there's been discussion already about kind of risk and health and safety stuff, which we are very, very conscious of. You know, we set out the boundaries very clearly in terms of how the non-blindfolded person will take care of the blindfolded person, and also set out parameters in terms of how they kind of go along with the activity. But basically, the blindfolded person is twirled 3 times to just disorientate them slightly, and then the non-blindfolded person takes them 20 steps, is generally what we will say, to find a distinctive rock or other feature in the landscape. And then the blindfolded person has to really get to know that feature using all their senses apart from sight. So feel it, smell it, maybe taste it, depending on how you're doing on the day. Listen, you know, really engage with it on a different level. They're brought back then to their start point, twirled 3 times again, blindfold comes off, and they've defined their feature. And, you know, you can give them hot or cold if they're going heading off or so on. Very important to set the parameters, or otherwise you could find yourself roaming the hills looking for blindfolded people, which isn't great. But again, it's just another way of really getting somebody to kind of get up close and personal, and to really engage with what's around them using different senses. Again, you know, you do, kids particularly, but adults equally will do this for hours and just switch partners and keep looking for something and try and catch each other out. But at the same time, they are really getting to engage with the landscape. Another just kind of broad set of ideas that we use a lot as well, and it goes back to, you know, when we're designing programs, we're trying to interest and engage as wide an audience as possible. With, you know, we're trying to get a whole community approach, and part of that is by covering all of the aspects of the place, but another part of it is by trying to include activities that kind of tap into maybe different interests, different skill sets and so on. So we very often use drama or, you know, something along those lines for participants who might be more interested or comfortable with that. Simon Says is a brilliant one. I obviously change it when I'm out in the field to Anya Says, but just because it's probably more universally understood. Simon Says, these guys over here have obviously Simon Says, put your hands up in the air. Simon Says, listen to a bird. Simon Says, put your left hand on a buttercup, put your right hand on something green, put your left hand on a moving, something living that's moving, you know, and it just forces them again to really look and try to see what's there, with an added kind of bit of fun in terms of, you know, if you forget to say Simon Says, and they do it anyway. The other one there, you can see these guys have actually created a little model of windridge, the practice that I was mentioning from our celebration. And we're obviously back in the classroom here, but we've been out and we've kind of been looking at windridges, and then they have put on a short little play of being farmers on the windridge, and why it's important and what it means. Other people in the class reenacted a Fulach Fia. There was another person who was storming a tower house. And again, they're just different ways of engaging with things that are happening locally. Again, I mentioned, you know, adults, we do a teacher education week and weekends, and we go to Corcomroe Abbey, which is a local Cistercian monastery, old Cistercian monastery. And, you know, we have a few different scenarios laid out that different groups have to enact, and then their peers have to try to guess what's happening. And in the feedback at the end of those sessions, for so many of the participants, that was their highlight. Just to have a bit of crack, have a laugh, and make a fool of yourself in some ways, but it kind of, you know, it sticks with you, and you remember those stories that you either saw your peers enact or you enacted yourself. And then the final just kind of couple of activities or activity types I wanted to mention. You can see here, hopefully in the photo, there's a variation just here on the clipboard of scavenger hunts. You know, they're again really simple, but they don't have to be focused on the kind of having all of the information. And I have found in various bits of work that I've done that very often that can be the off-putting piece for people engaging with the kind of learning aspect of place and place-based learning, is feeling that, well, you know, I don't have all the answers. I don't know what all of these species are. So how could I possibly start to share that with others? And I think for us, you know, you have to start somewhere, and starting the engagement on a very basic level is a really good start, and starting the observation, and that from that then you can build to try to pick up a couple of different species as you go. But being able to say, look, I don't know the answer, maybe let's go back and have a look together and find out afterwards, or ask somebody who might know. But the scavenger hunt here, you can see, hopefully, it's just, you know, find something red, circular, triangular, orange, green, multicolored, spiral. And obviously with all of these, it's a following, you know, leave no trace principles, in that, you know, they'll write down where they've seen it, or they'll bring me to show it to me, or, you know, we're not talking about picking these things, obviously. Or the other guys here are working on finding mini beasts and then being able to identify them themselves. So again, that's, you know, that's a kind of a get out of jail clause for me, in that they have a sheet with the pictures, and then we work together to try to figure out which of these it might be. And if we don't know if it's not on the sheet, look, we'll take a picture and try and find out. Slight variation on that then that works really nicely is, this is my ... find your own. And we do that with flowers predominantly. So the Burren obviously is well known for the flowers. And it's simple, you know, you bring it your group and you kind of point at a gentian or a bloody cranesbill or whatever it is, and say, look, this is the gentian, look at the color, how many petals are there, you know, really observe the detail of it. And then I'll say, look, this is my gentian, find your own. And they all have to scatter to try to find a gentian somewhere in the vicinity. Again, obviously not picking them, you know, standing beside them, and I'll come and check and say, yeah, that's right. Oh, I'm not sure, that is a blue flower, but it has got the same number of petals. And, you know, just if they haven't picked out the right one. And by doing it, you'd be amazed at how quickly they actually then pick up all of these flowers and know what they are and know some of the detail from each of them. And then the last one, again, people probably use these all the time, but the numbers in nature idea. And it's another good one, moving from one point to another, where you have to find one of something, two of something else, three of something, and so on. So, one oak tree, great. Two blackbirds, super. Three gentians, off we go. And we keep moving up and see how far we can get. So again, it's just pushing that kind of idea of seeing with what you're doing, could we incorporate a little bit of learning along with it. But with all of that said, I'm in some ways maybe going to contradict myself, because, you know, being out and well, maybe not either, but, you know, there's a lot of talk about, you know, nature connection, and I think particularly at the moment, there is definitely a lot of discussion around how people are engaging more with local places because of obviously the restrictions that we're currently under, forcing us to. And I don't know if I'm being overly negative or cynical, but I just wonder at some level, you know, is that actually going to translate into long-term engagement with place? Or is it kind of meaningful engagement with place? And there's some amazing work being done. Again, you're probably familiar with Professor Miles Richardson in the University of Derby. And he has a blog that's there that's really, he basically puts up all of the papers that his group are doing, and they're really easy and accessible. And, you know, they're very easy reading even for a non-academic audience, which is great. But his most recent piece of work, their most recent paper, they found there that being connected and engaging with nature generally involves spending time in nature. So that's fine. And obviously, sorry, with this as well, you know, it's focused on nature, whereas we're looking at whole place. But I think there are parallels. I think it's just where most of the work is being done on kind of nature engagement. And so, you know, we're taking the findings where we can get them. But Professor Richardson goes on to say, time in nature may not involve active engagement with nature. Time does not tell the full story. What matters is how that time is spent developing and being in a close relationship with nature. So I think it goes back in some ways to me and my siblings and the adventure playground, that, you know, being there was one thing, but it was about having the time and the space and parents and, you know, or facilitators or somebody who was, you know, pointing us in directions in some ways, about kind of deepening that it was more than just the time. You know, you see people walking in parks at the moment, and I wonder, you know, are they actually observing? Do they see that there are dog violets and primroses starting to come up and that the birds are here? Or is it just, you know, it's nice to be out and walking? I always think of this guy here, was a really, you know, you often remember the kind of more boisterous kids, and we worked with in his school for 9 weeks, and he was great. Like, he was a really lively kid, and we came out then obviously one of the days, and he lay there, I'd say, for a full 40 minutes and just, no, I don't think he was asleep. Maybe he was asleep. It was a lovely sunny day. And he came back to me at the end of it and he said, you know what, like, that was just amazing. I really, really felt like I was just there. I was listening. I could hear everything around me. He was just totally at one and in the place and experiencing the place on his own kind of terms at that time. So I think there's about that balance, you know, the activities and structuring and pointing in the direction are, I think, necessary and great, but then also about providing space and just allowing things to develop as they will, hopefully. So with all of that said, and yeah, hopefully a bit of time for questions, I just wanted to mention, so our what's it called, toolkit, like I said, is available on our website to download. There's also a piece of work that I did a few years back for a master's on place-based learning. So if people are interested in more academic literature kind of around the whole idea of place-based learning, and probably there's even more there on the place-based education side of things, the work is there. That's the link to that piece that was just recently published by the team in Derby. And then obviously, please do get in touch at any time. I am only too delighted to hear from people who are, you know, looking to do something like this, or have questions or equally suggestions for us. And I always finish, or try to finish, with these two girls who were participants again in the HBO programme. And they had, you know, I'd worked in the school for 9 weeks, and there was a small little country school, and, you know, not massive kind of involved, and there wasn't much chat at times. And I was wondering how it was going. And we got to the end where we were to be discussing the project that they were going to do, you know, what was their kind of place-based action. And I used to be in their school starting at 11:15. So I'd land in at kind of 11:05, which was break time. So I was walking across the yard with all of my bags and stuff hanging off me, and these two come over, Anya, come here. And I thought, okay, here we go. And over I go to their pitch, you know, where they're playing. And I see all of these feathers stuck in the ground, and kind of looked at it, and I was thinking, oh, is this some sort of an abstract art, or, you know, am I missing something here? But no, they told me that what they had actually done, they'd taken upon themselves and decided to go and gather the feathers and then to mark in their pitch everywhere that there were orchids starting to appear. So it's a Burren school where orchids are things that grow in pitches, and they had asked their caretaker to not mow basically where the orchids were coming up. And I just thought, this is it. You provide a little bit of information, a little bit of a spark, and then people then go on to do with that what they will, what makes sense for them. And probably their caretaker was not my best fan, but I always thought, that just kind of sums it up, that it was a small action in a lot of ways, but really had meaning. So I'll leave you with those as hopefully inspiration, and happy to take any questions or comments that may be there.
Hi, Anya, thanks very much for that. I know certainly when you started your presentation and you spoke about your siblings and you put up the pictures, it's something that we do in one of our modules that I teach, and it brought me right back. And no more than your own family WhatsApp group, I stuck into the family WhatsApp group. Do you remember? And since then, a row has broken out about who did what to what person in that river. But like that, been given that opportunity by our parents to roam, and that sense of freedom, and to go swimming in the river and the lake. And thinking back now, I certainly don't think I'd be allowing my own children to swim in that particular river, but it was that experience that was there and that was granted to us, and picnics and being in that place in that moment at that very time. And when we, one of my siblings put up about, something that happened, and I could nearly smell the surroundings around me. So I think your discussions around place-based education are just so important, and something that I'm truly inspired about, and looking forward to looking at more of the research that you've pointed us to, and certainly to look at the place-based toolkit. I'll be going online pretty quickly to have a look at that. So thank you very much. I think Joanne is going to come on board now and do questions and answers with you. Thanks, Anya.
No bother, thanks.
Hi, Anya. Thanks very much. That was wonderful. And I really loved the idea of in the place and for the place. We often talk about going out with young children and just being outside, but actually looking after it as well, I think is really important. Anya, we've a couple of questions have come in, if that's okay.
Perfect, yeah.
Yeah. So how would you create a balance between free play and wild spaces with teaching children respect for plants and trees? For example, in the children who might bend or break a young tree or stomp on mushrooms in the nature?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think from our perspective, we don't fixate, or we don't get overly concerned about that. Like particularly somewhere in the Burren, like you're going to walk on flowers, and that's fine. It's part of it. It's you're being in the place. Where there's obvious, destructive behavior going on, you just have to, I suppose, try to explain. And I would hope that, the way we kind of structure the program is that from the outset, you're talking about that there's respect, and that, we won't pick, and why won't we pick, and we won't break, and why won't we, that it's not just saying don't do it. It's trying to get them to think about maybe why that is not a good idea. And if it comes up, this is a total getting out of whatever, but like very often with us, you'd have maybe a teacher or an adult, and I would kind of say, look, your issue is discipline. If it's discipline, you deal with that. Whereas if it's kind of something that we can talk through and try and come up together with why it might not be the best approach, then we do that.
Great. Okay. And another question was, how does this kind of, it's come up twice in the chat box, and it's also in the questions and answers. How has this transferred in the COVID practices or during COVID restrictions?
Yeah, in terms of our work, it's an interesting one. We've gone online, and it has obviously got its drawbacks, but it equally, what we've really found is it has given massive opportunity in that we can now reach much broader audiences through these kind of settings, and it we were looking at anyway, kind of looking to develop online support for the education programs, so that has kind of pushed us towards that. I think I don't know if the question is also referring to kind of, as I was saying, that, you know, people are just being out more and engaging more. And I would hope, and I think for a percentage of people, that is going to continue and translate to a deeper engagement and understanding of place. But I'm not convinced that it's going to be this mass transformation, that the public generally are now going to all be place-based and be totally engaged for long term in their local places. But I hope I am proved wrong and that my cynicism is not warranted.
Yeah, exactly. And I think people are getting out more, and they're within their 2K or 5K, you know, they're beginning to explore a little bit more, but whether that'll stick or continue is a different thing. Another question here is, do you do summer CPDs for primary school teachers?
Yeah, we do. So we do our week, where basically it's, you know, that HBO course, you know, just hand it over. They're really popular. They do book out. We are planning to do an in-person event this year, but who knows? And we won't go online with it. It just won't translate because, you know, again, so it goes back again to the online piece. We're always wondering, so much of it is about being in the place, that when you remove that, you know, that element, it does take from it. And I think with the week course particular, it just wouldn't work. You know, it's more than half out in the field. So yeah, but hopefully keep an eye on our website, and first week in July is the plan.
Yeah, and just one more question I think there is. No, we did that one more. Somebody asked, you facilitate after school services, you know, that might be tours connected to a large crash or an after school service in probably out of school term, really.
Yeah, we do. Everything that we do is really dependent on our capacity and resources at the time. So we're open to, you know, doing anything. We've done, you know, we had summer camps, and we have done a lot of those kind of one-off events with groups. I suppose that the research and our experience as well is like the power of those is maybe not as significant as the long-term working with groups. Okay. So it's not that we do or we don't. We have done, and we possibly would, but it would just depend on kind of who was available at the time and if they had time that they could give to it. But it is something that that we're open to.
Very good. There's one more has just come in here. Is there a way of getting in contact with you regarding place-based education, as I have done my own research on how place-based education contributes to personal and social development of young people in youth work settings, and would love to start to open a dialogue with you as they're applying this to practice.
Yeah, so absolutely.
And you have your details are on the end of the slide, didn't you have?
Yeah, it's anya@burnbio.com, but if you get to as far as burnbio.com, you'll definitely find me.
Yeah. Well, Anya, I think that's all the questions we have.
Great.
And any more there? I'm trying to see in the chat box if there's any. I think we're going to take a break now, George, is that correct, until 2:00?
Yeah, we have our lunch break now till 2, and I've just popped in the next session link, and it will also be on YouTube, and I'll share the program now.
Thanks very much. And Anya, thanks so much. That was so inspiring and such a wonderful organisation, Burn Bio. Do a lot of work down there. I've had the pleasure of going down sometimes, but so fantastic.
Thanks very much. Thanks for the opportunity, and good luck.
Okay, so that's the slide for the next session, and we'll see people back. It's a new session, so you have to sign in again, isn't it? And we'll see you back at 2. Perfect.